Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. I was just thinking, we didn't say who should be introing, and I don't know if it was my turn or your turn, Mike. I think it might have been your turn. Did I just step on your toes?
No, I don't think you did. And do you know what? As we were counting down to record this, I was thinking the exact same thing. But I got thrown off because we're a little bit ahead of things. I think I introduced things with the one that just got released on YouTube, but obviously that wasn't last week, so I got muddled up.
Yeah, so this is being recorded in March. Sorry, it's not March. It's getting recorded in February, but it won't be out till like the second week of March. So we're way ahead. At some point, actually, that's something to talk about, I guess. In the near future, we will miss a recording because I was going to say one of us will eventually be away, and I am actually planned to be away. So I've got holiday now. Me and Charlotte are officially booked for the basically the last week of March, I believe, is when it is. So we are going to the Maldives of all places, and yeah, I can't quite believe we're going. It's hard. I'm kind of not excited for it because all my thought and attention is to the 10 to 11 hour flight, and I'm just like, I'm not looking forward to that flight. I hate flying, for those listeners who haven't kept up to date with my weird dislike for flying.
It's funny, I would have thought longer distance flights you'd prefer that because you can just kind of put your headphones in, watch a film or something, or just go to sleep and you can kind of forget about it. Whereas a short flight is kind of like you've got the ups, downs, and you've got no time to, I don't know, settle almost.
Maybe. Short flights are just basically when I'm in the air, I'm conscious of being in the air. So if there's any turbulence, I'm like, oh, it's just the longer the flight, the more chance there is for turbulence, right? So I just don't like that. As soon as you're in the air, I'm out of control. I'm way too high off the ground, and I'm like, screw this. I don't want to be up here. But you're right. I'm hoping typically that's what happens is once you're up in the air and it's hopefully like a smooth ride, I can kind of just switch off and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just walking around this plane as if it's, I don't know, a block of buildings or whatever it is. I, yeah, take my time going to the toilet, waste some time there. But yeah, we'll see. It's we leave actually on the evening, Friday evening. And so should likely try and aim to sleep the majority of it if I can. I don't know if, I might even mess around with melatonin just to see if that helps force like a sleep situation.
Is there a time zone difference between here and the Maldives?
I actually don't know. I believe there is. Let's see what the time is in the Maldives now. So they are 5 hours.
Oh, okay.
So it's similar to New York, actually.
Yeah.
Not bad.
And I'm showing my lack of geography here. Are we going east or west?
It is east.
Or east. They sometimes say, and I could be wrong here, but sometimes they say initially when you travel east, it's a bit harder initially compared to coming back.
Yes, actually, I think I might prefer it that way because I think when you're on holiday, you just have like the adrenaline and like the rush of everything. So you don't notice it as much. Whereas when you come back, it's like, oh, I've also just come back.
Yeah.
So
You've got like work and stuff kind of waiting for you.
Yeah. So if you don't know, the Maldives is just off, like, it's just off India.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, it's not as far as going to somewhere like Australia, which I have done, and I would love to go back. It's just so far. Just so far. And there's so many Australians I like, and I would like to meet again. We should just arrange to kind of find a middle ground. Actually, I guess the Maldives, it's almost a middle ground. It's maybe a bit closer to them.
I guess so, because I've heard that a common stopover is like people will fly to like Dubai or something, and then they'll go from Dubai to Australia.
Yeah.
So, although Dubai, I'm not sure. Dubai's a controversial place, I would say, because some people like it, but other people don't. So, yeah, maybe like Maldives is a lot nicer, or Bali. I don't know.
Yeah, Bali. I would love to go to Bali, Thailand. There are places I would love to go as well, especially Bali because again, there's a number of people that I'd love to see out there, like Brandon
Mm,
Kempter, for example, would
yeah.
comes immediately to mind. But yeah, not this time round. I have actually already been to the Maldives, which sounds ridiculous that I've been there and this is the second time. But I was basically invited there by my girlfriend at the time and her family because her best friend couldn't go. So then I managed, like, they were like, oh, you can invite Steve if you want.
Nice. It'll be I guess you'll relive some of that. It'll be interesting to see if it feels different this time around.
I think it will feel quite different. I hope it does. But I think it'll feel a bit more special this time. And especially because last time, because they'd already bought, like, I think like flights and accommodation were already like financed, which is the vast majority of the price, to be honest. And so this time going there and financing it all and being able to afford that, it feels a little bit more like, like, yes, I kind of have a better, perspective of that and that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. You appreciate it a lot more, I think, because you've kind of, in a way, earned it, and it's like, hey, I've earned this. I've sort of paid my own way for it, and so you really just appreciate all of it that lot more.
The thing I'm not nervous about, but I've never liked, I don't know how you feel about this, Mike, but I've never liked buffets. Because, well, kind of, since accounting for macros and understanding calories, I don't love a buffet because I tend to have this, and I've grown out of it a little bit. But if I pay for something and it's like, I just want as much of it as I can possibly get. So if there's free refills, for example, at a restaurant, that's perfect because you can just get loads of Diet Coke or whatever it is, although caffeine adds up, right?
Yeah.
I'd be thinking about that. But if there's Sprite or something, like, I'll go and just like drink loads. It's like great. But if it's at like, again, a buffet where there's loads of food and you can only, you obviously have a budget of calories, it kind of gets out of control. But what I'm trying to say is, basically with the Maldives, when you go there, you don't have much option. It's all inclusive. You can't really not do that when you're at the resorts. It's just how it works because you're basically on an island, and then that's all you're on. And it takes like, I think, like 30 minutes to walk around the island, and that's like where you're going to be for the week. So, you know. So anyway, I'm a bit nervous because there's like pizza restaurant, there's sushi, and it's just like you could order 2 pizzas, 3 pizzas if you wanted to. It's all inclusive. They can't really like stop you. The good news is, because I don't drink, liquid calories are going to be like not such a concern. But I just have to be sensible when I'm out there. Like, I've spent this money, I'm gonna just rinse the food. Oh,
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Like, I remember when I used to go to buffets, or when I was younger, I just remember like loading my plate as much as possible because again, it's that your eyes get bigger than your stomach and you just want everything. And what was really interesting, and I had this conversation with a client today as well, is I think something for me is that you get this feeling like it's not going to be there the next day. And you have to have it all there and then. Whereas actually, the likelihood is it's probably different for you because you'll have different restaurants and there'll be pizza and sushi, like you said. But in some places where it's kind of like a similar spread, but it's just everything, like you've just got to say, like, hey, this is going to be here tomorrow. I can just have something now, and then you can have the other thing that looks good later.
You can probably hear Ada. I apologize for the dog. She's very infuriated. I don't know what's going on. I feel like the doors. Anyway, I'm going to try and ignore her. I think normally you can hear her. I can hear her more, and it's more off-putting than you can actually hear her. It's not that bad. So I'm going to try and continue. Yes, you're right, though. As in, I totally get that perspective of like, hey, it's going to be around. And actually, you feel worse for stuffing yourself in such situations anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. But it's just something I'm cognizant of, that like, hey, my steps might be down because it's a 30-minute walk around the whole island. But there's a little gym there, has like techno gym
Mm,
equipment and stuff. So I'm kind of looking forward to that as being I thought I'd probably need to deload before I get there.
mm,
I expect I might, but it might be that ends up being like my deload. Uh, and if I feel good, I'll train on, I'll train hard, but it will probably be like a joint and connective tissue deload, just because there's no heavy lift in there. It's going to be high rep stuff, so that'll
yeah.
still be fun. And I'll make the session. They're not going to be like longer than 45 minutes to an hour. Like that would be the
Mhm.
longest I'd ever kind of do that. But yeah, it should be fun anyway. That's my news.
It'll be amazing, and I was just thinking then it'll almost function as a double recovery in that sense, because obviously there's the mental recovery, but then the connective tissue recovery as well. So, and the only other thing that I thought of as you were saying that is, you did such a good job at regulating yourself in New York, and they often say that if you're worried, you don't need to worry. If you're not worried, you need to worry. And I think that's the case probably with yourself.
That sentiment, I don't know where that comes from, but there's so many different variations of that I often use with clients. Like if you're asking if you need to deload, you don't need to deload. And that's often what I say. And then often some clients, and you'll probably have this, Mike, where you may have even asked me this at some point, where a client will ask me like, is there anything I can do to be a better client? And I'm like, if you're asking that question, you're already doing like just the fact you're thinking about it. It kind of comes back to that, right? Like, yeah. So I agree. It's sort of also, I just had one of my clients though had some like high pressure exams with regards to like their healthcare role, and I might have understated their role, just calling it a healthcare role. But anyway, they're a nurse, and he was very concerned about how well he'd done. And in my head, I was thinking, it's normally the people who like it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect. You know how bad, like how much you don't know. It's the people that aren't sure if they've done well in an exam are normally the ones who have done well. The ones who are like, yeah, I did amazing, are the ones they're just so ignorant to what they don't know.
Oh, that used to infuriate me when I was at school, where I'd go up to like a friend or someone who I knew was really clever, and an exact question like I'd go, "Oh, how did you find it?" And they go, "Oh, I did terrible, terrible," and then it comes back and they get an A star, and I'm like, "What? You just said
Yeah.
you did terrible," and it would infuriate me. And then I'd be like, "Oh, I didn't think I did too badly," and I'd get like a D, and I'd be like, "Oh, God."
Something else you mentioned in terms of the recovery, just maybe my final point on this was yes, the physical recovery, but the mental one. And not going to try, I'm going to be on social media so much less that week. It's something that I just, with the job that we do and being like full time doing this, I'm on my phone constantly on social media for whatever abundance of reasons. Some work related, some just you end up just doing it for whatever reason. I get up from here to go to the toilet, I'll take my phone with me and be on Instagram. Like I don't need to. That can be dead time where my brain can just breathe for a moment. So I said to Charlotte already that I want to make sure we have like strict rules surrounding phone use,
Yeah,
where because I know if she's on her phone all day, I'll just be on mine. And it's not so bad for her because when she's at work, she can't be on her phone. She's in meetings and things. It's just not tenable. Whereas it's far easier when you're working from home and all of this to be on your phone more than you maybe should be. So I was just like, hey, I can use my phone to like record things that are going on and take
yeah.
photos, sure, but not to then immediately upload to Instagram. Like I can just put an hour aside for like Instagram emails at some point. But more than that, I don't need it. I think that'll do me a lot of good.
Hugely, absolutely hugely. Like there's you kind of alluded to it, but like when we're constantly doing or filling our brain with stuff, whether that's, on Instagram or whatever, we haven't got a chance for things just to empty out and for it to refill with ideas or, novel, thoughts to maybe things that are on our mind or that we're struggling with. And just having that space to, like you said, just let your mind empty out a little bit is just invaluable. And sometimes it can be tough because, again, it's a routine, it's a habit. You think like, oh, what if X or Y happens? But then you come to realize like, oh, everything's actually fine. And the benefits of me having this more, free time is just invaluable. So yeah, I totally agree.
Any updates on your end? And then we
Mm,
can talk about the Comic Con, of course, and the anime corner that we'll have, anime segment.
yeah. Anime segment. No real updates really. Just we're continuing with the diet. Performance is going well at the moment. So I'm actually super happy right now. So yeah, everything feels sustainable. I feel in a great spot. So yeah, all is well.
Nice. Right. Yeah. I mean, in regards to my training and everything, like I said, I'm pretty much just like running that tightrope of I found a level of volume that feels sustainable but is pushing me to my limit. I wouldn't want to add to it.
Mm,
And I'm training everything at a like I'm just trying to match or beat performance, and that's taken me to like 0-1 RAR most of the time, depending on the movement and where I'm at. It's actually interesting, Mike. I don't know if you how you feel about this, but I had some weeks where I might have been at a 0 RAR, but I could beat performance week on week. And I think it's just down to where I am in terms of recovery post show, and also some movements maybe are a bit new. And so I can see that level of adaptation. So that feels way less fatiguing than when you're at 0 RAR and you just repeat performance. So say you do
mm,
100 for 10 on the leg press, and then next week 100 for 11, both 0 RAR. It's way more fatiguing when it's 100 for 11 and then 100 for 11 again. For some reason, that just, I guess it's that cumulative fatigue that you've got, that limited adaptation now that you've got. But I found myself in that position sometimes where I'm like, oh, this is now like the fatigue I'm feeling from just matching performances. Yeah, feeling it.
mm. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a combination of, like sometimes when you're progressing, you kind of know that you're going to be able to beat it in a way, but then there's the other side when it's like it's a fight to just match that performance. And I think that kind of sense of a fight versus like, hey, you've got this kind of thing, I think there's that element. And then the only other thing that came to mind when you said that was like, there's no sense of moving forwards. Like I kind of almost had this picture of, you're running on a treadmill and you're not going anywhere versus running outside. Like, hey, you're going somewhere and you're making progress. And it's, yeah, those kind of came to my mind as you were saying that, and why it might be harder and feel more taxing.
What I will say is, I do view it as progress because whilst it's matching performance, you're matching it under another week of hard training. So you've
True.
got more cumulative fatigue, in theory, so long as everything else is equal. So I'm like, even though I did, again, 100 for 11, say, it's under more fatigue conditions. So actually, in some sense, it's a small progression. But I
Mm,
do find once you get to this point where you are just matching across the board, you've only got so many weeks that you can do that before the psychology kind of breaks down, motivation to train breaks down. Normally, some niggles start creeping up because you're training at such a high level.
mm.
And so that's why I'm like, I expect I might need to pull back before basically a month's time or three or so weeks. It's going to really kind of creep up on me quickly.
For sure. And I also thought you've got to almost weigh up the pros versus cons, because if, say, when you're doing those sessions, the impact on your recovery, like you might just have a session that just buries you, and maybe for an hour or two afterwards, you're just in a hole and you need to lie down because you're so fatigued. And it's like, well, what's the con of that? Is it worth just taking a deload because of the impact that's having on your life, sort of thing, and then just, hey, take a deload, refresh, so that the impact on your life isn't as great? Again, we all have to come to that, because most of us listening here aren't professional athletes, in the sense that we haven't got another job. You're a pro, Steve, obviously, but you've still got another job. So
Not paid though.
not a paid professional athlete. And so, we have to weigh up the pros and cons on the other aspects of our lives.
Yeah, man, I haven't actually, thankfully, I haven't had that for a while. In fact, this session that I do today, which includes RDLs, it used to kind of wipe me for quite a bit afterwards. Whereas actually, it's not anymore. Like I've adapted to it. It's almost quite nice. But that's why, like I said, I'm still so proximal to having competed, where my recovery is just still like I'm kind of catching up to being in like a normal recovery
Mm.
position. So it's quite interesting to go through that. Let's talk about, I guess,
Yeah,
Anime Corner then. How was your first Comic Con? How did you enjoy that, Mike?
it was really cool. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't have any expectations going in at all. And it was really nice. It was really nice just to look at different things. I think it was hard for me to appreciate, because there was so many animes that I haven't yet watched. So things like Demon Slayer, things like kind of even Attack on Titan, and all these, One Punch Man, all of those things. I just probably, there were characters which you were like, oh, that's so cool, it's that guy. And I was like, oh, I don't know the significance of this. So it was really cool to see lots of different things. Um, but equally, I'm like, oh, probably if I give it another year, then I'll be able to appreciate things a lot more.
Yeah, I'm even still. Actually, it's funny. We were going through. I think I was talking you through like the anime I've watched, and I was like, I've seen this, 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 this. And I was like, man, I'm even not even. I wouldn't call myself like a proper weeb. Like I don't know, and I haven't watched enough animes and know them in the depth that a lot of people probably who are visiting that do. But fortunately, I kind of had expectations of what it would be like beforehand because I'm that type of person. Look up reviews, try and understand kind of how to maximize time from it and how good is it going to be. And unfortunately, I had heard. Well, actually, to be honest, I saw some comments that said it was amazing and they had a fantastic time with like their kids or whatever. And there were quite a lot of children. To my surprise, how many children dressed in anime costumes? That I'm like, don't know if that's age appropriate, but regardless, it was how I expected it to be. Like lots of stalls with them selling like tidbits, like t-shirts, stickers, badges, books, figures, this sort of thing. And it's just I'm never gonna buy that stuff. Like it just ends up
No.
like I do sometimes. Like I've got that Akatsuki kind of pillow, and I've got a gifted Grogu, which you can see
Mm.
over my shoulder. So I will pick up some bits and pieces, but I'm very picky and choosy with that sort of thing. And normally I have them in mind of when I'm going. And apart from just people having stalls and selling things and like looking at the artwork and stuff, there wasn't much more to it. So I really enjoyed like hanging out with you and talking through things and like seeing some of it. But I'm not sure I would go out of my way to go to another one like that. I'd probably go to another Comic Con that maybe was a bit different, had
Mm.
more going on. But to go to like if they were like doing another one in a few months' time, I certainly wouldn't be like, "Oh, Mike, do you want to go?" I'd be like,
Yeah.
probably just better off training together and walking around London and doing something else.
No, definitely. And I think there was a bit of a mismatch. But the other reason why I think we probably also didn't want to get loads of stuff is because sometimes the quality wasn't always the highest. And so you'd end up maybe buying a t-shirt and it might not last as long. And, it'd be cool for like a couple of wears, but then over time you'd be like, oh no, I've got to throw it out kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel bad, Mike. I was saying this to Charlotte where I kept saying this to you where I don't know, it's like someone who's like a real coffee connoisseur and they're like, they won't go to Costa, they won't go to Starbucks, they only go to like, I don't know, these little bougie places that are like not like a chain basically. And I'm kind of like that with clothing now, where I've tried some like higher quality clothing, like I don't know, a Lululemon, for example. Like it's good quality stuff, and so I don't want to buy like anything that's not going to last. And especially like you said, if it's a design you love, but then the t-shirt itself, I don't know, stinks after a wash, or you get a hole, it shrinks, whatever it is, it just ends up not being worth it. It's good for kids though, because they grow out of this stuff anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like they probably, yeah, they'll grow and they'll only get 2 wears out of it anyway, so it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it also made me think like it's like what they say, buy cheap, buy twice. And hey, if you're gonna spend, if you'd rather spend money on a good quality piece of clothing, then don't pay for cheap stuff. Just save up so that you can actually have the better quality stuff. And I think that's totally reasonable. Personally, I don't think there's anything stingy about that. You just know what you want, and that's fine.
Yeah, I again, it's only since spending a bit more on some of these things, and nothing crazy, just like slightly higher than the cheapest, like Primark. I never really understood. I always just thought, oh, underwear is just underwear, socks are just socks, a t-shirt's just a t-shirt. They're all the same. It's just you've got a logo on that one, and this one hasn't. But I came to realize that no, there is actually a fair bit of difference, and there is a point of which, like, if you buy Gucci, I think you could probably find a t-shirt that's just as good quality of half the price. But half the price is still probably quite expensive. So sometimes you are just buying the brand, but sometimes, yeah, you're buying a bit more than that. And a lot of them are printed on like a Gildan or a Fruit of the Loom type of t-shirt. That's just like again one of those cheapy ones. I even appreciate it with the Revive. Actually, if people want Revive clothing and like high quality stuff, I still have some available. I should talk about that because I found I send it out personally. Well, Royal Mail send it out, but I have to write your address on the package and everything. I package it up myself personally, but I found my process, so I'm happy to kind of do more of that. Yeah, we've got t-shirts and joggers, and the reason I wanted to do some kind of outside of the store we generally have is because I wanted to get samples, make sure it was a certain quality, and kind of have that available. Because again, the ones that kind of in the store are generally printed on just like largely available t-shirts and things, which often aren't to the standard that maybe you want. And so, yeah, if people are interested in that, you can check them out on the website at revivestronger.com, or just reach out to me via Instagram, and I can give you advice on size or whatever if you need that.
I would, and I know it will sound very heavily biased coming from me, but I would genuinely encourage people to consider purchase or do purchase them, because the bottoms are the most comfortable bottoms I've ever worn. Like you said, they're high quality, like they're not kind of, I don't feel like they're going to fade really quickly, and the t-shirt is super comfortable, and it gets more comfortable after more washes you get because it kind of softens up a little bit. So like, guys, seriously, it's not only does it look cool and you'll look awesome, but genuinely you'll be so comfortable you'll never not wear them. You'll be constantly in them.
Thank you, Mike. It's a glowing review. I appreciate it, but I'm really pleased with them as well. So much so, I was just talking to the people that made them for me, and I was like, I want to do different colors, but I also want to get a jumper done. And I'm like, I've got too much stock at the moment. I need to sell through some of this before before I. And everyone who's purchased them, thank you so much. I highly appreciate it. And yeah, just proud to have people repping the brand and supporting. I appreciate it big time. So. Yeah, I don't know if we've got anything else. The other thing we did was we went to why have I forgotten what it's called? Uzumaki Ramen.
Yeah.
In London. It's kind of a anime themed restaurant, which had mostly anime that you were aware of. I think. Well, it's largely Naruto, of course, based off the name. So you knew a lot of the anime in there, at least the characters from Naruto, which there's a huge amount. And yeah, how did you enjoy being in the themed restaurant?
I loved it. And I want to preface this because obviously I am a positive person and I do tend to overhype sometimes my references. And I also want to preface this by saying that I went in and I had ramen, but that was the first time I was having ramen. So it's probably not fair for me to properly rate it because maybe I don't have anything to compare it to. But I would say just on the whole experience, I really enjoyed it because the people there were super friendly. Obviously, it's just so unique with the anime and just all the drawings. You walk in and there's like a little configurine section. It was almost like we were going to a mini Comic-Con again.
Yeah, they have a little store.
Yeah. So like that was awesome. And like I said, they were super great. They're all like, all the waiters are like wearing like
the Akatsuki jacket,
yeah,
right?
the Akatsuki jacket. And yeah, it was great. I mean, like from the moment the table, it's all like scene appropriate. It was just super cool. And the toilets, like they had all these pictures and writings and stuff. It was just a super cool atmosphere and vibe. So yeah, I had a ton of fun and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like that they play like anime music, of course, as well, which is quite nice. And obviously, the menu is all like based off various foods and things that you see within anime, like for One Piece, where like meat on the bone is like a huge thing in One Piece, and they had like a chicken leg type thing that you could order and things like this. So that was quite cool. And they had like various curries and stuff. You know, the curry, that one specifically from Naruto. So that was nice. And yeah, in regards to the food, it's definitely not like, it's not bad at all. I would say it's not like obviously miles better than like a Wagamama though. So I've had like ramen. It's something I always get. I'm so surprised you haven't had ramen from Wagamama before. Obviously, you just haven't ordered that. And I've also been to Wagamama probably quite a lot more than you might. But I would say it's on a level of actually, I would say it's slightly better than the ramen that you get for Wagamama, but not like night and day. I'd say it's definitely inflated prices due to being a themed restaurant. So you have to bear that in mind, that it's like, hey, you're paying to be sat in like a very cool space. I liken it to, I don't know if you ever went there as a child, Mike, if you went into London and they used to have, I don't know if they still have it, but like a rainforest cafe. Do you ever remember that?
No, I don't.
If you, Hollywood, what's it called? Hollywood, why have I forgotten what that's called? Or the Rockstar Cafe.
I don't think I can't remember being in.
Planet Hollywood, sorry, is the restaurant.
I don't think I've been in Planet Hollywood, but I know what you're referring to.
So yeah, these are like they're hyped up places, very obviously commercial, but also very themed. So they have like Hollywood stars, and there might be kind of models of them, and loads of pictures on the walls, and music, and Hard Rock Cafe. That's the one I was
That's
thinking
it.
of. Yeah. So yeah, similar place. So it's kind of like a bit like that. You're paying. The food is of a standard. It's fine. It's good. But obviously you're paying to be just part of that environment. Which, if you're an anime fan, it's like a must to try it out at some point if you're in London. So yeah, it was cool to go there.
It was even, some just of the they had some of the small details as well, and they had like look, we had this banana salt, which again was quite quirky, like on the side, like they had all these different oils and stuff, and yeah, it was just really nice and novel. Yeah, I super enjoyed it. But something that I think will be useful also for the listeners is, obviously we both had ramen, was slightly different. Like I had like it was called the Uzumaki ramen, which is pork ramen, and you
Continue,
had like
Mike.
and
I'm
you
gonna
had a
go for a
beef
wee.
ramen. But then our weight, so both of our weights the following day jumped up. So, and I think Steve has talked about it previously, where he's had ramen in the past as part of a refeed day, and the next day his weight has come up quite significantly, and so it was just a good experience. The fact that it happened to the both of us, and interestingly, not only the next day but the day after, our weight had come down, but not fully. So I think again, it's just a good reminder for people just to again don't be too worried if the scale does funny things, and take into context the meal that you had the previous day, and that it might have just had a ton of salt and sodium in it.
Yeah, ramen is obviously in like a soup of uh like salt basically. It's very salty, the soup that it's in. It's not soup, is it? There's a broth.
Miso.
That's the
Yeah.
miso, yeah, like a miso broth. So that's salty, and then on the side I had like the triangle of rice, whatever that's called, which was cool to try, but I had like loads of soy sauce on that. We added the salt to it as well, so it just kind of got very salty. So it was funny, we both experienced that. And also one of my clients, Rob, who we brought up multiple times, he had a Chinese. His weight spiked even more than ours, but it was like the amount of salt that's obviously in Chinese, I imagine, is really high too. So what to do in such situations is often, and the way we, I think, both ended up doing it, and the same for Rob, is we just took it out of our weekly average, because it was just bad data. It was just skewing the average, so it just wasn't useful. And different people will react differently. It depends how sodium sensitive you are. What's your baseline sodium intake anyway? Like if you've already got a really high salt diet, it's probably not so different. But I think it's probably pretty hard to be as high in salt and sodium as what that meal was, because it was very high. And then, yeah, it just takes a few days to normalize. Once you get back to your normal diet, you just don't want to freak out at a single weigh-in. It comes back to what we mentioned previously, actually. Should we get some questions? Because I know we're already halfway through. And actually,
Let's do
I guess
it.
it's good timing. And we've got quite a lot of questions. As a reminder, guys, this is requested in the hyperbolic time chamber, and you can go submit them in there. That is on my Instagram, on my profile. You'll see it linked next to like the links that you might see, like our website. You have to be on your phone though, so don't try and access it off like desktop, because it won't show up. You have to be on your phone, and it's free to come and join. And you can also leave immediately afterwards. There's no like you're not locked in, you're not like subscribed, you don't have to unsubscribe, you can just leave. So you can ask your question and bugger off if you wanted to, but please, you can stay, and there might be something interesting in there. Let's get to the first question.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's start with Tony Isaacs. So he asked, hello. Actually, Mike, have you got these open as well?
I do.
Cool, so we can alternate. I'll ask this one, and then you can ask the next one. I'm interested to know why Mike opted for a longer conventional cut rather than a mini cut for his recent diet. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. So, at least my thoughts were I had a lot more body weight to lose than probably a mini cut might have allowed. So that was probably one of the primary reasons. And also, I think, to be honest, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, I think that was probably the main reason why we opted for a slightly longer cut as opposed to a mini cut. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, answer it really quickly was a mini cut just wouldn't have bought you much massing time. I actually see this as a flaw a lot of people have, where they're basically mass up to their peak off-season weight, and then they're trying mini cut to buy more time massing. But it's like, well, you're like all the way up here in terms of like your peak weight. If you want to buy yourself lots of massing time, you kind of have to diet all the way down to the bottom of your like lower intervention point. You're kind of at the upper end of your mass. So yeah, simply put, a mini cut wouldn't have bought us much massing time. So we thought, bring it right down. Also, what I will say is, and especially when you haven't earlier within your competitive career in terms of when you compete, often, not that this happens so much with you, Mike, but often the recovery is a little bit wonky. So what I mean by that is sometimes you might have to overshoot your lower intervention point in terms of body fat to start feeling normal, but also because you're not as skilled at managing that post-show phase. I don't think you necessarily did that, but I do think you might have needed just extra time away from dieting to feel fully recovered and good again. So oftentimes with these people, for your situation and also people that might overshoot the end, you might have to do not a mini cut, you might have to do an extended cut to get you back down again. And now you're in that kind of position where in future preps, it will be easier to manage because you'll probably get there a bit more recovered and or have better control over that phase. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, definitely. And I think, again, sometimes it's only something that you can appreciate in hindsight, and you're just, yeah, like you said, sometimes for some people dieting is just, you don't even want to consider it for a long time. And sometimes, maybe it's not that bad, but actually only when you look back in hindsight and you're like, do you know what, I can really appreciate this cut more now that I've had, a good 10-ish plus months, away from dieting. Like you almost want to diet. Like you kind of like, you want to be like, yeah, do you know what? I'm really itching to just maybe reduce my food intake or something. I think sometimes that's a bit of a good place to be.
That's where you should be. If you are starting a diet, unless you really have to for whatever reason, and you are like, man, I don't want to diet, it's not a great place to start a diet. You want to be in a position where you're like eager to get into a diet. Let's get to the next question. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we won't get through all of these. There's quite a lot.
So Teddy Gross _official asks, ideas for less popular splits that could work, i.e. back/front instead of upper lower, or back hams and buys, or chest quads tries alternating.
So what I will say is, I have a fundamental slight distaste for splits in general because I think they miss the mark in some areas. So I might talk about being on a lower push pull split at the moment, but that doesn't cover everything because when am I training abs? When am I training carbs? I'm training my delts more frequently than that. Like, it doesn't cover everything. So it's kind of like, oh, that doesn't really like fully state everything. It's similar to if you train full body every day. Normally, it isn't like you're doing the same full body session every day. You're kind of emphasizing certain areas, de-emphasizing other areas. Sorry, maybe you train your back every day, but like it's an upper back day, and then it's like the next day it's a lats day. So you kind of differentiate it that way. So I think there's so many splits that like could, on theory, like you can call them whatever you want. Like, hey, you might do upper lower, or you could do push pull, and do like, hey, quads and chest. But you could also do hamstrings and chest, and then quads and hamstrings. Like there's so many ways to mix it up. It all comes back to what split is allowing you to recover adequately between sessions, and also get the highest. Well, comes back to get the highest quality done for the week. So I think yes, there's so many ways you could split stuff up. What I will say is, though, there's a reason certain splits are popular, because they work tremendously well for a huge number of people. And so I wouldn't discount that, and don't try and be quirky for the sake of it. Set it up to get the best quality of work done through the week.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like it doesn't matter how you slice it or how you how you define it, term it. It's like what you just said. What allows you to get the highest possible quality for the volume that you've got, and whatever that is, hey, go with it.
One I will say is like a less thought of split is ones for like men's physique competitors. I've come up with some quite different splits for them because obviously legs is much of a lesser of a concern. So it's like push pull lower push pull. So they're doing upper body 4 times a week, lower body once a week. Like, and it's not a traditional split, right, that people think of, but it can work really nicely. Or even push pull, and just doing hamstrings or quads at the end of those push and pull sessions, and just like isolation work, just to get enough to maintain their quads and hamstrings, but it's not an emphasis. So yeah, though there's some, and no, same could go for females. And I have less experience setting those up, but certainly I've got a few who are on like glutes and training those very regularly through the week. So it's like, how would you set that up? Like, how would you talk about that in a split? If the glutes are trained almost every session, it's challenging to name that in like a bird's eye view. You lose those details, like I said, with hamstrings and calves. Sorry, with calves and abs.
And I think that is a good example of don't be confined by a split. It's almost have an outcome backwards approach where it's like, right, what is my goal and my outcome? And let that determine what your split or what your training looks like, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to start off with a push pull split. Hang on, no, what's your goal? Like, is your goal just to get big side delts and have a men's physique? Um, physique. And if that's the case, then right, that then shapes your training, and that shapes what your split is probably going to be, along with these other factors.
For sure. Next
Right.
question is
Next.
from B. Immy. She has asked, my client, do you
Yeah.
think genetics and mental strength are components which impact why some individuals can handle longer mesocycles than others? She actually asked me this during my check-in as well. So I've already covered this with B, but you can give your perspective, Mike, and I'll see if it's different to what I gave.
I would say to an extent, for sure, because my initial response would be yes. But then that doesn't mean that it won't change over time, because so genetics is obviously static, but mental strength is dynamic in the sense that so if someone is really new and they're not used to maybe pushing hard, maybe kind of pushing hard frightens them a little bit due to one reason or another. But over time, that might change, because as they work with the coach, they get reassured. They know that, hey, if I go to failure, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get injured, and that allows them to then, push, allows them to go for longer. So I think they have a role for sure, but I don't think we need to pay too much attention to it, work with it, and it might even change and improve over time.
Yeah, genetics are one of those things where it's like, yeah, they play a big role. Cool. There's nothing you can do about it. So forget.
Yeah.
It's like one of those. Genetics impact everything. So when someone asks me, do you think genetics impact? And I'm like, yes. Yes,
Mm.
they absolutely do. And then I think genetics impact mental strength and fortitude as well, for sure. Like, the part of your intelligence is massively controlled by genetics. Like, so it makes sense that they impact your what's it called, your personality. Like, it's all comes and can be tied back to genetics. Obviously environment plays a role too, but you can only play with the cards you're dealt with. But I have noticed that some individuals are less able to deal with the discomfort of fatigue that training brings, and I think that's okay. And I do think a point you mentioned in terms of it being something like that you can build and develop over time is definitely true. It's similar to like training to failure. People talk about that as being a skill. I used to be like, man, you just train to failure. How's that a skill? But I actually think it is a skill, because some people think they're at failure and actually they're at like 3-4 RAR, or they just lack that focus and ability to like really lock into a set, and you develop that over time. So I think that was really well said, Mike. Next
Yeah.
question. Otherwise we
Next
won't get to them
question from yeah, no, you're doing a great job. So from Dr. Jared Rice, he asks, how important for desirable outcomes is it that the coach like their client as opposed to dislike? Hang on, I probably read that wrong.
No, you
How
read it right.
Okay. How important for desirable outcomes is it that the coach likes their client
It's a
as
strange
opposed to
question.
dislikes? I think could have. And then how does one get into virtual coaching? So there's two questions. We'll answer the first one.
Yeah, man, that is a out there question. How important is it that I like my clients? I mean, it shouldn't matter in the slightest. The only concern is unconscious bias that might take place, and that's unconscious, so I can't know it. So I can't say that it's important. I've actually certainly had clients that have frustrated me. I can't say I dislike them, but I certainly have. And I think every coach, you can't be an honest coach if you can't say, yeah, there's some clients I like more than others. You have your favorites. It just is part of it. There's some people that just, for whatever reason, you just connect and click. It's like you have friends, you have 10, and you have some you like more than others. It's just part of the process. You can't get on with everyone. What I will say is it's very, very rare that I ever like really like I can't say I've disliked any of my clients. I don't think that's I think I can honestly say that. Like I said, it's some I maybe like more than others, but because of the way that we kind of interact and we bring people in, we almost make sure that everyone like you're going to get along from the get-go, if you know what I mean. Like, we have our consultation. To have got to that consultation, they have to have paid a consultation fee. They have to have looked us up. They probably have followed us for years. They probably listened to the podcast. They follow us. If I'm going to have disliked them, they're probably not going to like me, if you know what I mean. So almost filter them out. So it's just so rare. So actually, I think for results, like I said, I've had clients that, for whatever reason, have maybe rubbed me a little bit less the right way than have rubbed me more the wrong way. But it doesn't impact the ability to get results because it comes down to being professional and giving them what they need. The only time it's if a personality clash or communication is challenging, but the way we coach, it kind of gets through that. And I think people get filtered through that from the get-go anyway, or they just don't last longer than, they sign up, but they barely check in and they just filter out through that process, unfortunately. So yeah, at least those are my initial thoughts on that first question. I don't know. I think it's going to be a challenging one for you to answer, Mike.
Yeah, no, I think I would just echo your comments, really. It's like there has to be an element of, having a rapport. And that's the whole that's part of our reason for doing also a consultation, is making sure that we get along. That's what we say. But what you touched on, which I think is really key, is regardless of whether you dislike or like client or coach, you have to remain professional, and you can't let that cloud your judgment, because it's about, providing a service. And yeah, like I said, you can't let that cloud your judgment. So I think that's the most important thing more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's the how well you get on will play a role to a certain degree because of the communication, but it shouldn't impact your ability to drive results, as far as I'm concerned. Especially from the coach's end of liking or not liking their client. If the client doesn't like the coach, then it's going to be a problem. But otherwise, yeah, you should be a professional in that manner. And then in terms of getting into virtual coaching, man, that's a really broad question. I think first of all, wow, how do I even answer that? There's no regulation, so it's not like if you ask me how do I become a personal trainer, well, I know to be a personal trainer in the UK and get a job with a gym, you have to have a certain qualification to be able to do that. So I would say, hey, the first step is to go and get that qualification. It's what I had to do before I became a one-on-one PT. And if I was to try and be a one-on-one PT again, I'd have to go get it updated, because I don't keep that updated because there's no need for it, because with online coaching, there are no prerequisites. You can literally set up an Instagram account, call yourself Jared Rice, the online coach, and you can start putting out content to sign people up. Now, there's obviously a lot of back end of what your systems, processes, all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot that goes into that. I can't think off the top of my head of a provider that provides you from beginning of wanting to get into online coaching and every single step along the way. It's just giving me a light bulb idea of something that we could produce. I was going to say easily. I'd know exactly what to do step by step, but I don't know how I could easily produce such a product. Someone else might be aware of a product or service that does this, and they can comment below. But yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mike.
No, not anything. I don't think there's anything I'd add. Let's just move on to the next question.
Okay, so this is me, right? I'm asking, yes.
Yeah.
This is from Nabil Kasbayui. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Hey, I would like to know if you have clients that fast during Ramadan. If so, what are your best advice? Have you had any Ramadan clients?
So I don't have any Ramadan clients at the moment. I might have had one at some point, but no, I don't think I've had any Ramadan clients. Um, I think the good thing is that we know from some of the recent protein research is that it probably matters less about meal frequency and protein frequency and more about the total protein intake. So, um, so we know that actually, if you can manage to get your total protein allowance within that Ramadan window, then perfect. That's great. And you'll probably be still making progress. And then if you can try to align, your training sessions for, again, a time that suits you, so it's not right at the end of the fast, but maybe it's more towards the beginning, then again you'll know that you'll have good fuel in your system, you won't be hungry, so that means training performance will still be good. And I think those are kind of the big rocks in my opinion that to stick to, really, and that would be my initial advice.
Yeah, I have had clients go through it. None recently go through it, and I'd agree with everything you mentioned there. And it is a bit of a case by case thing. Some people seem to deal with it really quite well. Other people don't. Obviously, it's not just a nutrient timing thing that's kind of thrown out. It's the the hydration fast. Like that's the thing that is kind of quite crushing, and especially before performance. And I think you said this, but I ideally like people to get a meal in and get hydrated before they train, and that can be quite liquid based for that reason, because then you're going to uptake the glycogen faster. You're also going to replenish electrolytes faster, and you're obviously going to get hydrated overall, therefore, in a quicker manner. And you'll digest it quicker too, so you can get to training a bit sooner and then get some more food in afterwards as well. But the other thing it tends to impact for people is their sleep, which is unfortunate too, because it's to do with the sun rising, isn't it? So it's
Mm,
kind of like they can only eat when it's dark. And so that really limits your eating window. And if you want to get some food in before it's light in the morning, you also want to get a good night's sleep, it can be quite restrictive on that front. So I'd just say it's obviously just not an optimal time to push physiology in any sort of extreme. So we don't want to be going to like some people might think, oh, like it's basically a time restricted eating and I can use intermittent fasting and that can be ideal for like really rapid weight loss. It's like weight loss, yes, fat loss, maybe not, because
mm,
the risk to training performance and therefore muscle loss is probably quite high. So I would just encourage people, if they're thinking to gain during that phase, maybe just reduce your calorie surplus a little bit and reduce your expectations with training. And if you're going to cut, maybe don't be in such an aggressive calorie deficit. And so, yeah, again, reduce your expectations with training there too. Auto regulate your volume. You don't have to, like when you go into a diet, people are like, oh, I'm going to cut back volume because I'm going to be way more fatigued. Don't immediately cut it back,
mm.
but certainly don't like go into it expecting that you won't be able to drive as high a volume as you typically would be. So yeah, that's most of the advice I would play. But the good news is, as you mentioned, I believe you said, Mike, sorry, when you were talking it through, I was trying to see if I had any notes on Ramadan, but I don't really have anything. Uh, Protein and the impact on MPS is we can have big boluses of protein and we keep that muscle protein synthetic spike. So we're growing for an extended window. So you're not losing out on that kind of optimality of, oh, I must eat protein every 3-4 hours to spike leucine and get that kind of muscle protein full effect and then like let that settle before another one. You can still actually get easily 2 protein feedings in and you're like 95% of the way there. So yeah, I don't think it's as big a concern on that front. It's more the sleep and the nutrient timing in terms of carbohydrates and therefore the training quality that's going to be hard.
Yeah. And does Ramadan last for a month?
You're asking the wrong person. I can't actually remember, but it's at least a month for sure.
Okay. Because, if it was, say, a month, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long. So just to kind of either go into maintenance or, like you said, just to kind of maybe go at a slower rate of loss or not take things too extreme, it's not actually a long amount of time in the grand scheme of things. So to kind of metaphorically slow things down or press pause, hey, it's not a bad thing at all.
29 to 30 days,
Oh, there you go.
depending. So yeah, basically a month.
There you go.
Next question.
Next
So
question.
this
So
is, yeah, Your turn.
So Gallimard asks, can having too many training environments hinder progress? Question mark. I must juggle between 3 with different exercises for each. Still keep my split intact.
Good question. So I have some clients. Actually, one client specifically comes to mind where he is bouncing between different gyms all the time. And this isn't a consequence of him needing to do that. So you might have some clients, I don't know, where during the week they have a gym near work, and then on the weekend they're at home and they have a gym at home. And then there's different equipment available. I would say the more environments you have and the more different gyms you're juggling between, the more exercise variation that you're having there, the more challenging it is. So, for example, with my client, like he is, if it was okay, and I have some clients that train in different gyms, but let's say it this way: if your microcycle is, so you have like push pull legs, every single session is done at the same gym, even if it's different gyms. It's not such a concern because week to week it's the same, even if it's inconsistent during the week. Week to week you can still track progress. But if it's like you might Monday push might be at X gym, or it might be a Y gym, or it might be a Z gym, and my exercises are changing every single time, then it starts to become hard to track. And with my client that I'm talking about, he likes to just mix up all the time. And what I've tried to encourage with him is having some core lifts that we can track. So keep at least this thing the same. So if all those gyms, you want to train at different ones, great. But if we can keep a barbell bench press, because every gym's going to have a barbell or a dumbbell bench press set, or a, I don't know, squat pattern of some sort that every gym has. Let's keep like a push, a pull, a squat pattern, and then like a leg curl, lying leg curl, or a hip hinge. Let's try and keep something static so we can get a marker of how things are going, because otherwise it is hard to know. Theoretically, so long as you do sufficient volume and intensity, so if you train everything very close to failure and sufficient amounts of it, you can see great progress this way. But I think it's just challenging because some of the research that we have, I believe, on like there's a learning curve to exercises, and you can't effectively overload an exercise and then progressively overload it if you keep switching it. And this is that kind of muscle confusion effect where it's like, it's actually not a positive thing. You want to be not confused. You want to be very well adapted to an exercise so you can progressively overload it over time. So that would be my concern, that someone is switching things up so much that they're just relearning things. And the body is just like, I just have to, like, I get to learn how to ride a bike, but I actually don't get to ride it forward. And then because I'm learning to ride a bike, and then I'm learning to ride, I don't know, a unicycle, and then I'm learning how to roller skate, but I'm not actually progressing really with any of these movements because I just haven't had time to be able to push it forward. That would be my main concern, I think, to kind of wrap
Yeah.
it up.
No, great. And I just thought of another analogy. It's like, again, if you're trying to learn a language, spend time learning Spanish. Don't one week learn Spanish, the next week learn German, the next week learn Japanese, because you'll never have the time to learn any sufficiently.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to, yes, you can make progress, but you need to have some core lifts that are somewhat stable within that, so you can track them and progress them. And that might have to be dumbbells or barbells, things that every gym is going to have. And so long as there's some stability there, I think you can then be able to measure and progress things over time. Mike, I know you've got a hard cut off right at 6:30.
Let's do
So
one
do we
more
have time?
question. We have time for one
Okay,
more question.
right.
Let's
Let
ask for
me
Ali.
get to Ali's question. And I guess we can get to the other questions next week, maybe, because there's still plenty.
Yeah.
So Ali is my client. What up, Ali? He said, if each of you couldn't lift and had to pick up a sport or physical activity besides lifting, what would it be and why?
Ooh, good question. So before I actually got into the gym, I came from a background of playing golf. So my parents are massive golf enthusiasts. So I think I'd probably take that up again. Another a slight thought that I had when you were reading that question is, does CrossFit count? Because that's technically it's weightlifting, isn't it? So I guess that's cheating. But it'd probably be, yeah. Do you know what? It might be something like golf potentially. Yeah.
Similar to you, my mind immediately goes to what did I do before I started like just seriously doing bodybuilding? Yeah, be like, oh yeah, I do powerlifting. I don't think you can do that So mine was football. So for my Americans, it's soccer. And yeah, I used to love playing that. That was like my jam. And I actually got to a reasonable level at that too. I think you got to like a pretty high level in golf, didn't you, Mike?
I wouldn't say high level. I mean, I got to a decent level, but I stopped relatively early. I stopped before I kind of went to uni, and I think if I'd have been consistent, I could have gotten a lot better.
Hmm.
So yeah, but in some ways, I don't
Every week,
miss.
Mike.
I know. Well, to be in all fairness, I put the alarm back a little bit, but no. Anyway, yeah. So I stopped it a little bit early, but hey. The only other thought that I did have is I was fortunate enough as a physio to work in hockey, and hockey is actually quite a cool sport. And so for having a sport that was maybe slightly more athletic, hockey would be something that I'd be interested in taking up.
Nice. Yeah, I was scouted for Cheltenham Athletic when they were in the Premier League. So they were actually a decent team. But this was when I was at primary school. So I was really young. And I had to give it up when I went to secondary school because it would have got in the way of my education because it was quite a journey to get to practice for that. And then, yeah, I just didn't take it any further than that at that point. The other thing I would do is probably running. I was a good runner, kind of mid distance is why it was my jam. So, yeah, guys, thank you for your questions. We'll get to the other questions so long as I think they stick around within the hyperbolic time chamber, so we can get to those other ones next week. We'll catch up on them. If not, I'll answer them just individually when I've got time in there. And yeah, I guess anything else you want to say, Mike?
No, I appreciate you guys asking questions. It's awesome, and we definitely will do our best to get back to all of them at some point because we appreciate them and we think it's a good use of this podcast as well as just tracking our improvement season.
Yeah, well, when I can see there's a large chunk of questions, I'll give us like a 15-minute segment at the start so we have a bit more time because I also don't like rushing through questions. And maybe in hindsight, we should just take every question. If we don't get to the other ones, we can just save them for next time so that we don't feel like we're rushing any, because sometimes there's some good discussions that can be had from just diving deeper into like tangents and stuff. But yeah, guys, if you do enjoy these, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any episodes. Let us know in the comments. Give us a nice rating and review. We'd highly appreciate that. Screenshot it. Tag myself, tag Mike on social media. Mike at Mike Revive Strong at Mike Revive Stronger, at Revive Stronger is me, of course. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next episode. Cheers, guys.
See you later, guys.